Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everyone, welcome to Night Vision once again. We've got a great show planned. I'm just going to get right into it. At dawn on Friday, October 13th, 1307, scores of French Templars were simultaneously arrested by agents of King Philip, later to be tortured in locations such as the Tower at Chinon, into admitting heresy and other sacrilegious offenses in the order, and then they were put to death. So that's pretty much where we get the idea about Friday the 13th being an unlucky day. However, there's a much more to that story, and I want to find out exactly what did happen on that day, but also, what do we mean by scores of French Templars? How many were really rounded up at that time? And then what about all the rest of them? Because we know they were many at that time, not just knights themselves, but Templar families. So when I want to know about the Templars, or really just about anything, who are you going to call? James Martin.
I sounded like Ghostbusters then, in which case...
You're the Templar Busters. Yeah, you're the Templar Buster.
Come and exercise me kind of thing. Hi, everyone. Great to be back. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's so good to see you and have you back on the air again with me. We've missed you. So I know you've been busy, crazy busy. And so I'm glad you could take the time to come fill us in today, because we've talked about this a lot, you and I, about how, and of course you're right in the midst of writing a series of 3 books about the entire history of the Knights Templar, preconception to the bitter end. And it certainly did not all end on Friday, October 13th, 1307. So what did happen that day, and how many people are we talking about that were actually sort of rounded up?
Do you know, it's a really difficult question to answer exactly how many people were rounded up, because best estimates of the knights, we're talking about a third. So about the third of the total population. But the reason it's complicated is because this is in France. Remember the Templars on the 14th of October, 1307, in England and Scotland were carrying on as normal. Same in Spain and Portugal also. So we're talking about France. The problem is, what is France at this point? So if you look at the Languedoc and you look in the Roussillon, which is the further south in France you can get, really, other than in mainland France. This part is, it's not part of France at all then. It's an independent county, really under the Crown of Aragon. And the preceptory there, Mas Dea, very much asserted that they were under the protection of the Crown of Aragon. That didn't stop the French coming for them, though. So
didn't.
Didn't
that cause a problem?
Oh, ultimately, yes, it did. And ultimately, we see a crusade against Spain. When people forget when they're talking about the crusades against the Cathars, there was an official campaign. Yeah, there was an official crusade after that, and then border tensions. I mean, the order from Mastella escaped right the way into essentially southern Spain, really deep into what we would call Spain today.
Mm.
That didn't stop the French Royal Army following them, though. So you see, it's really difficult to establish exact numbers about this date.
Yeah.
Also, the other
It's
thing,
certainly not the majority.
not at all. I mean, I've been saving this for an interview like this. I can give you some names as to people who were tipped off. So these are
Who were
people.
tipped off and then were able to get away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, again, and I think I'll give a bit of a preamble. I'm sure for those people who are tuning in for the first time going, why were they got rid of? I'll do a bit of a background in a little bit, but I just thought, just at the very top, well, we know that if not all, certainly some Templars were tipped off. I am currently working on an interesting document about the Languedoc in southern France, but I can tell you something. So you've got someone called Jean de Chalon. Let's call him John of Chalon. He's a sergeant in the order, so he's a Knight Templar. Remember, if you've heard me speak before, Templars are not all knights. Most of them actually are farmers and
Workers of
pages. Yeah. The retinues and all of this. So Jean of Chalon is arrested. He's one of the Templars that is arrested and brought to trial for ludicrous charges of everything from homosexuality, Satanism, witchcraft, the usual stuff. But at his trial, he says something very interesting. And he says that his name is Gerard de Villiers, or Jared of Villiers, had been tipped off about the arrests and managed to escape with 18 galleys filled with some Templar treasures. Now,
okay, I'm going to say something really dumb. What's a galley?
So a galley is a ship. It's a cargo ship.
Oh, I thought it sounded like a ship.
Yep. Don't think of the ships that these ships of the line that you might think of during the American Revolution, with lots of cannons. There aren't any cannons.
Right.
So these are ships that do some damage if they're rammed into you, or if
Where did they set off from?
The rumor is La Rochelle.
Oh, that's the old La Rochelle thing.
So we get to okay. So what we kind of have to do is, okay, so this person has confessed to this under torture. Can we get any other sources? And the answer to that is yes. I mean, other people have written about this. You've got Malcolm Barber. He writes in The Trial of the Templars. He gives reference. You've essentially got there's a number of modern authors, but crucially, we have the sort of extracts from torture, really, from documents. And again, I was reading something in France. Let's just try and verify whether Jean de Chalon, was right. And yeah, I can certainly verify that our friend Gerard de Villiers, or Villiers, he was the last preceptor of France. Now, remember, the Knights Templars.
Preceptory.
Well, you have a Grand Master who is in charge of all of the Templar provinces. So France, England, you've got Turkey, the Levant, basically, Middle East, what's left of it, Italy, and all of these. They've got these different provinces. I've not given you the accurate names, by the way, but if you want to find them all, look them up. One of them was France. That's what the Grand Master's in charge of the entire order. but each province had a preceptor.
Mhm.
Now, we don't call them commanderies, we call them preceptories. So we're not on about the preceptor of a local building, you know, a Templar centre. What we are essentially talking about with yes, it's he is the Grand Preceptor of France, so he is running France. So it becomes a little bit more interesting then, where we've got this idea that there's a tip-off, and of course, many people got very excited about this and started to say, well, they sailed away from La Rochelle, they did all of that. Some uncomfortable truths. The Templars didn't have a fleet at La Rochelle. They owned 3 ships, speculatively. The rest of them were mercenary, hired. So if they were to have sailed off into the ocean, where would these mercenaries go? They would certainly want to be coming back. Unless there was that much treasure that, that convinced them. Other problem, if they did, some have suggested some Templars ended up in America. That's possible. You know, they could have followed the old Norse routes by Iceland and Greenland over. They certainly could have done that. But treasure wouldn't have mattered, would it? Who's going to purchase anything in the Americas at the time with gold?
Right. There's no money. There's no nothing.
Money. So either way, it's all very that's all very interesting. We've done lots of shows on that. To answer, really, what we're looking at is about 1/3 of the knights are arrested. Some of the workers were arrested as well. There are a handful, but it's generally believed. You're talking about illiterate workers. If they were, they certainly weren't talked about. They weren't documented. So my sense is no, that they went for the knights. But again, the events of literally the break of dawn across France, instructions are open, quietly, boots are put on, swords, are armed, plating, your armor's put on, sneak to the nearest Templar preceptory or wherever the nearest knight is, and knock, knock, knock. We have a warrant for your arrest. Apart from it seems in a lot of circumstances, no one was home. So there is another idea as well that floats around, that the Grand Master of the order and a number of others, basically the Paris Preceptory, the Paris Temple, as we know it, the Grand Master is someone called Jacques de Molay. And again, you've got a lot of rumor here that essentially he knew of the King of France's orders. And again, we'll go back and meet ourselves about what those orders were. But it is alleged that the wife of King Philip IV in France tipped off Jacques de Molay. And it was decided that he would sacrifice himself to allow others to escape.
And didn't he, or isn't it alleged that he cursed the king, and who else was it? There were that was it the king and the Pope?
The Pope, yeah.
And each of them were dead within the year.
Yeah, and that certainly is. It's a little bit too romantic.
What is that thing about 700 years? I used to hear this story, this legend, this rumor that there was, the Knights Templar would avenge themselves, or something would happen, in 700 years. Which, of course,
the thing is, what you've actually got is there's a lot of poetry. If you think about it, as
yeah,
this person is burning, and you think about, if you put your hand on the hob, and you'll immediately go like that, you're probably not going to come out with a curse. Well, you probably will come out with a curse word,
that's
but you're
right.
not going to deliver a full mantra.
Right.
So these stories tend to come about afterwards.
Mm.
Do you know what, though? These are very sometimes stoic, warrior monks. It is possible. We do know when people have self-emulated, they set themselves on fire, that they have spoke. But yeah, again, there's a lot of romanticism. And, the other story is, of course, when during the execution, during the French Revolution of the French King Louis the 16th, or 16th, when he's beheaded, someone screams from the crowd, "Jacques de Molay, thou art avenged." It sounds excellent, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Just
it's
sounds a little
great.
bit
Yeah.
too good to be true. But listen, as an historian, we want them to be true because, we have the benefit of reading the past.
Right.
So we want the conclusion. We want eventually this horrible story to finally be avenged. And of course, we also want it to be true. The reality is maybe
Yeah,
not.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of romance around this whole thing, for sure.
And that's probably, we talk about the 700 years.
Yeah.
Well, actually, more people today, I think, than ever, at least know of the Templars. And this way, their memories.
Exactly. Maybe it's, the redemption of the Templars, they're redeemed, which brings me to, I'm skipping way, way ahead, but I know also that you've recently been to some locations that I want to get to as well. Uh, while we have the chance, while we've got you here as a captive. Um, but I remember very well back in 2001 when a woman named Barbara Frawley uh, came out with a document which became known as the Shinon. Is it Shinon or is it Shignon?
Shinon, yes. Yeah.
Shinon document um, that was actually written and signed, uh, back in the 1300s, that absolved the Knights Templar and restored them fully to their full rights. Oh, that was crazy. To their full rights.
Hello, the Templars.
But it which was great. And then I remember, I think it was around 2007 or maybe even a little after that, that I remember it was over in Montsegur, wasn't it? Where a bishop came from the church and sort of issued the decree or the apology to the Knights Templar.
Yeah, there was an apology for the Cathars. I think that was 2012, 13. And then, yes, another apology for the Templars. Yeah, the Shinon document, Shinon parchments, go by a number of things. Essentially, you've got this. The instruction was for the knights actually not to be arrested and taken under the king's watch, but instead over to the Pope in Poitiers, where the Pope was going to personally intervene. Now, the reality of that situation is, if that would have happened, in a different timeline, if those knights had gone to the Pope, almost certainly the Pope would have escaped captivity from Avignon, and the Templars would likely still be around.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Pope's private army, ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, what's so crazy, is that document, was so old and, was just, discovered in the archives in 2001. But even worse than that is there was another Shinon document which basically said almost the same thing and was even signed by some of the same people that had been issued and was actually made public and is fairly well known among scholars and academics, but yet not widely, has never been widely released out there to the public. So, it was definitely made known in the 1600s that there had been that other document.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
that other document was issued by it was Stephen Ballouz or Ballouz. In French, Stephen is Etienne.
yeah.
So if you want to read a little bit further, and it was in 1693, 16. It was around about that period. And he was, a historian. And yes, again, this other Chinon document. This one was and we're saying another Chinon document. This is a separate, as you say, a sort of second one, a variation.
Yeah, I think it was actually, they were each issued in Shinon.
Yes, that's right. Well, the second one is addressed to Philip IV and essentially says, all knights who have confessed to heresy have had the sacraments restored to them.
Yeah, restored to the sacraments. Yeah.
They're brought back into the church in essence. So you've got, again,
whether they want to be or not, huh? No.
yeah, we've captured them in person, and now we're going to capture them.
Yeah, exactly.
Theocratically. The notion really is, the Pope's been caught. He's been caught by Guillaume de Nogaret, who's the Chancellor of France, one of the effective Prime Minister of France, one of the most important people at the time. And he goes and kidnaps the Pope.
We went to his village, right? His place.
Yeah, Saint Felix. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a town of Cathars. You've got, of course, the Cathar monument. Very moving, I thought. But yeah, he's from there, and you think, what a horrible man from such a beautiful village. He was very pleasant, and I do recommend to anyone who has the opportunity to visit the Languedoc and is around Toulouse and Carcassonne to take the trip out there. There's a monument to the Cathars, but of course, in the Languedoc and the Occitania more generally, you can't talk about the Templars without coming across the Cathars too. But yeah,
talking about that place that's up on the hill.
Yeah,
with the different dedications.
Yes.
Yeah,
looking in different directions.
A nice place to be.
And fittingly, on a village totally destroyed, there's very little to see of it apart from the walls on the. You have to let your eyes adjust, and then, oh, good God, this is an entire village that was burnt down because people thought differently.
Why do you reckon that the church never made it known that they had been granted absolution? They've obviously sat on this information, and I don't know. I just did a show recently with Walter Bosley where we talked about the Vatican archives and what may or may not be in there, and it just seems like it's such a waste. I mean, it seems like the things that are held in the Vatican archives, at the very least belong to the world, not to mention the items that in artifacts and writings, manuscripts, parchments that actually belong to particular families or cultures.
Well,
It's like, why? How is that?
because the church is a very touchy organisation. That's probably not the answer you was looking for, but the church are very sensitive. And, if I was the church, and I can't answer for the Vatican, I totally agree with your comments. But when you think about it, 2 popes were kidnapped by Guillaume de Nogret and took to Avignon. And what that meant for the Catholic west of Europe was you had a French pope, you had puppet popes, and you had then an anti-pope who was supported by countries that perhaps didn't like France. England, for example, Portugal might agree that the true pope is actually not this French person. Now, of course, popes don't like to be reminded that they're anything but infallible. So this idea that they could be caught and twice and kidnapped and put within, you can go and visit Avignon today and see the palaces and whatever else, but they don't like to be reminded of that. And might it be that they made a mistake? That they actually shouldn't have signed off on the orders to disband the Templars, perhaps should have fought a little bit further. I mean, yes, okay, Philip's got the Pope. What about all these cardinals? And what about the rest? Why didn't this become the crusade against the French? Essentially, you've got, Philip IV. Look, the real reason Philip IV wanted rid of the Templar Order was Pope's private army, 1. 2, he had an ego. 3, he had Nogaret whispering in his ear, like if you've watched the film, was it Lord of the Rings, one of them, and you've got someone whispering in the kings, that sort of idea.
Yeah.
I don't know where we're up to, 4, 5. The king's heavily indebted to the order. They are running.
That's right. That's why he did it. He owed him a lot of money.
Yeah, and crucially, the paranoia had reached fever pitch because there's another order that perhaps doesn't get the light of day as much as it should, and this is an order called the Teutonic Knights, and the Teutonic Knights are effectively Prussia, Brandenburg.
So, more around Germany.
Northern Germany, southern Baltics,
yeah.
Around this area. And that's it, the Teutonic Knights essentially ruled geographical Prussia as it's known, had charters that were issued by the Pope and, crucially, the Holy Roman Emperor. And they were established as a sovereign monastic state. They were independent. And Philip is concerned that, something like 25% of Templar landholdings were within the Languedoc, that essentially the Templars were going to announce their independence in a very similar way. And that's what they wanted. Now, something else that's often missed, you've got that bit of paranoia, and bear in mind from the French king's perspective, there's just been a crusade against the Cathars. Essentially, that was not really against the Cathars. It was done under heresy, but essentially was a land grab from the northern French. I'd only been ruling the territory for a short period of time. And the thing that people forget...
It boils down to money and power, doesn't it?
It always does, but I'm sorry, we can't let the Templars off on this, because in 1306... the Templars supported a coup in Cyprus. which essentially there was a regime change. Henry II gives way in favour of his brother, and essentially this is the power of the order. The order can choose; they're becoming the kingmakers. So from Philip's perspective, we better sort something out. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to effectively resist. So what he does is, and famously, by the way, and look, again, Friday the 13th, we spoke about this, can I just recommend you haven't got a subscription to KGRA? Get onto it and you can have a look at the back catalogue. And we did a show called Friday the 13th and the origin. So we know, just as a reminder, that Friday the 13th probably has some very deep-rooted historical connections going back to Babylon.
To this day, each Friday the 13th, each October 13th, there's a procession in honor of the Knights Templar of a group of people. I don't know who they are, but they are dressed in white robes and carrying torches. And you can watch them going up the mountainside up to Mount Bezu. It's really interesting.
I'm not sure why anyone would be going up Bezu.
I'm not sure. But there have been stories told by certain, authors and others, that there was some sort of Templar presence there at one time or another, and
they stopped.
It seems like I remember there was something about gold up there. They were digging for gold or something, and I don't know. But I will tell you one thing about Bezu is one time, my friend, our late friend Gloria Amendola and I were taking a tour group over, and we went over to Bezu, and there's like a meadow at the foot of Bezu. And as we were approaching, we could see this beautiful rainbow. And when we got up there, the rainbow actually ended right there in the valley. It went right into the ground. I've never seen the end of the rainbow.
So LGB Templars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, I have my doubts on Bezu, if I'm honest. I mean, there was something there, but
happy Pride Month, by the way.
Yeah, happy Pride Month, everyone.
Yeah,
I have my doubts. Bezu, just for everyone, is a very small hamlet village, if you want to.
Yeah.
Not too far away from the town of the village of Rennes-le-Château. It has been alleged that there is a Templar building there, and the best I can find is that they had stopped there. Not that they owned it, or if they did own it for a very brief time.
The other day that I had some recollection of someone saying that Bernard of Clairvaux had been over there.
Again, look, just because an historian says no doesn't mean it didn't happen. I just can't find any evidence of it. So
just mean we can't corroborate it.
Yeah. But just coming back to, the Templars and their downfall. So we've just discussed Cyprus. The reality is as well, the Templars, in previous shows, you've seen the Templar map, and that's just to the buildings. The amount of land that they own is significant. They're not paying any tax. The French.
You just mentioned the map. I've just got to say that map is incredible. What James has done is mostly on the ground research, but also pouring through archives and all kinds of restricted academic archives that I don't have access to, and most of us don't, and verifying these locations. And he's created a map, and Europe is almost completely red. Each side is marked by a red Templar cross, and you can click on it and it'll bring up a little photo, a little explanation of the site, whether or not it's verified, and all that. And it's just an amazing, amazing thing. We've got to figure out how to get that up on our website. And then also, I've got designs on creating a little center, a tourist center there in the region. And I would love to have it on the wall there. That would be amazing.
It would. I have to say, it'd be good to see that happen.
Oh
But
my gosh,
look,
it would be so amazing.
again, if you look at some of the other episodes we've done where we've shown the map, I mean, this is one of the reasons why we are still talking about the downfall of the Templars. The events were so shocking. And if you have a look back, I haven't got it loaded, unfortunately, to show everyone. But again, you can have a look back at, in the archives. And by the way, the secret archives I've got access to are the academic ones, not the Vatican. So
yeah,
just in case you're wondering. But yeah, it's this event was so shocking because, as you see on the map, there are so many Templar sites everywhere.
Yeah.
They were, they were around the corner. They not just around the corner, they were in your village. You probably had a relative who worked for them. They were as everyday as your bank card. And better example.
Well, that's a nice analogy because they were kind of the first
bankers. Yes,
yeah.
That's not meant as an insult.
Checks.
Imagine you've lost your bank card. You go into a bit of panic, and this is exactly what happened when they were disbanded. Nobody thought this could have happened.
That's interesting. I wanted to ask you, since we mentioned earlier about how the Templars have sort of been romanticized, and they're very popular among most people, or people that know about them. And but what about at the time? Obviously, they were very prevalent. They were everywhere. They were right next door, around the corner, and everything else. But generally, just the populace, what do you think was their impression of the Templars? Did they like them? Did they respect them? I'm sure they didn't romanticize them,
No. What we understand about the Templars and their attitude, or people's attitudes to them, is quite a mixed bag, to be honest. William of Tyre, we know, hates them. I mean, absolutely despises them. And the best we can get is, some people thought they were petty because they would constantly be provoking the Hospitaller, another order. Emptying water tanks, dressing up as them, changing their robes so they look like a Hospitaller, and then causing mischief in a village. Very petty, but that's isolated instance. I think some would have seen them as an employer.
That smacks of like fraternity pranks or something like.
Yeah, well, that's basically
raids.
Basically what it is. You've got to remember. Look, if you wanted to go for a trip around time, you get into a time machine. Can I recommend avoiding really the 1300s? Because you've got this huge shock. Like I say, your bank cards have been wiped. There's nothing there. What are we going to do? The downfall of the Templars in France, and it did spread in a limited fashion to England, not necessarily everywhere else. But when they were disbanded, I mean, this is shocking stuff. This is, suddenly the building, that's next door to your house, just the next day isn't there. Now, I'm speaking metaphorically. They weren't demolishing these buildings, but, right. The order, it didn't exist. So it's shocking, whatever you thought. Some would have been happy. Some would have been exceptionally concerned about, well, what's going to happen next?
And I would imagine they were, terribly inconvenienced in a lot of ways.
You've got, think about it. The Crusades have effectively been lost. You've got the Siege of Acre, at Tyre, you've got all of these losses, and eventually the Crusader states finished, taken by the Islamic forces, there's this retreat, and then suddenly you're getting rid of the army that's been helping to fight against this so-called infidel, and it's no longer there. Who's going to protect you?
Yeah.
Over the border, if you're in southern France or you're in Spain, there's still a large chunk of Spain which is called Al-Andalus. Who's going to help then? So there's a lot of uncertainty. Not to mention time-traveling friends. You've got that shock to your system coming, and then once you've got over that, plague's on its way. So try and avoid this period, I would suggest. It's full of turbulence and really marked the downfall of the French monarchy as well. So where you've got Philip, and where you've got Philip, King Philip IV of France, and he, I think there's also a slightly different tact with this. Having just finished a chapter, I've very nearly finished the book now, actually, but on the Merovingians, Carolingians, and eventually the Capetians, who took over from the Carolingians. The Capetians, Philip IV is a Capetian, and I think they believe they had a God-given right to be a king. But not just that, they had an ancient right, and I think there was an arrogance that said, who is this Pope? We are much more divine than he. And I really do think that had another, or at least it was an excuse that could be used in all of this. So, essentially, for those people who somehow are not familiar, just the usual repeat. So what happened was probably within 2 weeks, perhaps around October the 1st, and again, just please bear in mind when we're looking at calendars, they were using the Julian calendar, we used the Gregorian calendar. There had been, you've got Pope Gregory to come yet, and he sorts the calendar out. Yeah. Or maybe had have done. But anyway, just let's bear in mind, Britain, for example, remained on the Julian calendar until the 1700s. So we're not getting into the dates. Let's just go with what we know. Round about the 1st of October, orders are issued, distributed around all of the French king's territories. I suggest it would have been staggered. You're certainly not going to send those orders out on, Thursday the 6th, Thursday the 12th, 1307. They're not going to arrive in time. And it'd look a bit odd if suddenly, kings, courtiers are racing around the country. That would have attracted some attention. So very quietly. And the orders were not to be opened, on pain of death, effectively. Do not open this envelope and this parchment, this seal, until the morning of Friday the 13th. So again, some people have asked about time. Well, here we are. Sorry to date this recording, but today is the longest day. Oh, it certainly feels like it, but it's the solstice.
Definitely the longest day of my life.
Yeah, it's just been talking to me. So yeah, these orders are, open up. We don't know exactly the time. It's at daybreak. So we're in October. It's going to be around about 8-9 o'clock in the morning, something like this. And there they are. But the French king was kind of hoping not just to arrest all of the knights, but also to take treasures, presumably, and anything else they could get hold of, and they found nothing. There were some very few things were captured, but nothing. This has then led to the larger mysteries as to what happened.
Where are the treasures?
So what happened to it? Maybe they never had it. Maybe they gambled. I don't know. Whatever the story, but we don't know in essence. they had, they were the first bankers. They established a monastic banking system, I guess. But travelers' checks essentially around Europe, and they were tortured. They were tortured. Chinon is important because they were tortured in the Tower at Chinon.
Tortured in the name of the Lord.
Yeah, and if you're tortured, I'm not surprised.
Say anything. Oh my God.
Yeah, and by the way, let's not look back to our medieval friends and think, oh well, look, how simple and barbaric. They knew that. They knew people. The Romans knew if you torture people, you can't rely on the confession.
Right.
This was, we'll extract something from them, and perhaps it was a little bit more than just confess to these trumped up charges. I mean,
getting information out of someone.
Historians out there, people with an interest in history, people who like the past, all of that. I tell you, if you read from so-called Dark Ages, early medieval period, right the way through, the church has a general script for people they don't like. And it goes like this. You're either a woman, are you gay?
It's automatically.
Let's say, you think differently. You must clearly be, a sodomite. You must be a witch. It's the same nonsense over and over. And you must confess to, oh, yes. And then crucially, let's just tweak the torture package for you. And so what they did was included the worshipping of a head. Baphomet, goes by different names, not particularly clear what's meant by that. It could be Muhammad, it could be something else.
Sophia.
Or whatever. I think the Templars had argued.
What is that? What kind of cipher is it? Atbash?
Yeah.
Atbash cipher, it translates to Sophia, which is,
wisdom.
Holy wisdom, yeah. Which is feminine.
So it could be, but I'll just say this as well. I am open for that idea, definitely. But I'll just make the reminder: how many heads of John the Baptist are there in Europe? I mean,
probably not as many as splinters of the true cross.
No, that's a very big piece of wood by now. But John the Baptist, these are papally sanctified, by the way. So the best I can come to is John the Baptist was a hydra. So being realistic, though, these were the trumped up charges, and I suspect were not about the confession, more about where's everyone gone, where's the money, and there you go. In total, of the there was 138 Templars, most of them exceptionally elderly by the standards of the time. You're talking 50, 55, very elderly. They were the ones who were questioned in Paris. Remember what I've just said. It's difficult to get lots of numbers together, to make something very accurate. But of the 138 who were captured and tortured in Paris, we don't need to repeat what that kind of torture that went on. 105 confessed. So these were confessions to an obscene kiss. God, what else that they would?
Meaningless confession.
Stand on the cross, and I think anything to stop the pain. These are elderly men. Let's just remind ourselves with this. We can talk about the political intrigue of a king, but at the end of the day, we're talking about some of those barbaric things that can go on and still very much going on right now. Oddly enough, a very similar part of the world that the Templars would have known. Torture, It should be outlawed. Think if if you
Oh,
have
I
a.
thought it was outlawed.
Huh,
Doesn't mean the people aren't going to do it, though.
I suspect there's more torture going on today in certain countries than, well, in fact, in most countries, I think there's more torture going on than there ever was in the medieval period. But just think, if you can't, because we are talking 700 years ago plus, if you can't feel anything for people with that distance in time, then think to your grandparent, your father, maybe your brother, someone that you do love, and imagine them being tortured, because that's what we're referring to.
Yeah.
And all of it outwardly for money, when actually the Templars seemed, not everywhere, but in some places, seemed to be the preservers of very ancient wisdom.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
getting down to the wire here. We've just got a few minutes left. So why don't you fill us in on your accidental research that you did recently?
oh, good God. Yeah.
That was so crazy.
Yeah. Long story cut short, but anyway, I was reminded that on certain social media platforms, you get reminders of dates in history, and I had a reminder, and it was a photo from an event, and a few photos actually, including one of a hotel room that I was stopping in a place called Grantham, and a friend who was with asked, "Oh, what was the name of that place that we stopped in?" I said, "I think it was the Angel or something like that." So anyway, looked it up, and oh yes, it was the Angel and the Royal, and all of this. But of course, because it would be, as we was reminiscing over the event, a sort of party catch up, that kind of idea, I jumped out of my skin because it turned out that the hotel was actually,
which you had not chosen.
Oh no, I didn't. No, this was booked through work. Someone to work with, I should say.
Right.
No. So, yeah, it turned out this was a Templar building. And by the way, one of the oldest still going businesses in the UK, founded by the Templars. A message had come through, not enough time to go through, just a few days prior to this, effectively, an alleged message from the other side, from somebody who had basically said, my name, the Templars, and then a reply with, they're looking for him. Well, they absolutely found me with this memory. It was very bizarre.
What was interesting too was that they said that, there was something in England,
Yeah.
And it just was funny because you were in England and at an accidental hotel, as it turns out to be built by the Knights Templar.
And actually not that far away from a town called Baldock, which is where the Temple Brewer Preceptory is.
And what does Baldock mean?
Baldock means Baghdad.
Baghdad, yeah.
Yeah. And basically the Templars named this place Baghdad based upon the French Baldock, which is the French word even now for Baghdad. So it's just one of those sort of, right, okay, very unusual sort of set of circumstances. And yes, I've got some further trips to France as well. Perhaps for another show, I'll have completed some of the journeys there. I'd say since I was last on, I did visit a commandery in France called the Salle Bruneau commandery, currently being restored. Very interesting. Mm-hmm.
Where is that?
It's just near, well, it's in New Aquitaine.
Oh.
So near the town of Libourne, kind of near Bordeaux. But yes, you know, since last being on the show, that is very interesting. Yeah, nothing compared to the preceptories of the Languedoc, where it's steeped in symbology, mystery, etc. But still, another one to tick off the map as having visited.
Yeah, literally tick it off the map. My goodness. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come back and join us again. And I hope you don't stay away long. And onwards and upwards. Oh, the dogs are starting to go crazy. Right on time. Right on time.
Right on cue, as we say. No, I will carve out some time. Hopefully, as we come on the next, I don't know, a few weeks, months, whatever, should be a little quieter following some medical interventions and all the rest of it. So yes, you know, good to see everyone, and take care of yourself. Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks. Good night, everybody.